Welcome everybody to the Love Alchemy Masterclass. Tonight's topic is how to slay the emotionally unavailable man dragon. For those of you who don't remember what we're going to cover tonight, don't worry. I'll remind you, we're going to talk about what emotionally unavailable man dragons are and how to tell if someone's emotionally unavailable before you even go on a date with them. Why trying to change them is a huge waste of time. The biggest mistake that most people make that keeps attracting emotionally unavailable partners or suitors instead of commitment-oriented singles that actually have the capacity to enter into a healthy, happy, long-term relationship with you. We're going to look at attachment styles and how they impact your experiences with emotionally unavailable partners or potential partners. We're also going to look at what you can do if you find yourself in a situation and you recognize that the person you're dating is emotionally unavailable, or the person that you haven't yet started dating is emotionally unavailable. And then how to find out if you're unavailable yourself. And then the single most important thing you can do to let love in again, to increase your own level of emotional availability so that you have healthier, happier, more fulfilling and engaging relationships. And so this masterclass is for you if you're single and you want real love, right? You want that healthy, happy, committed relationship with the partner of your dreams, your unicorn king or queen, whatever you want to call it. This is the class to be in for sure. And healthy, happy, committed relationships include 4 specific components, 4 elements. I call them 4 love elements. And those elements are commitment, which is the conscious decision to be partners in life's journey together. Connection, so the emotional capacity necessary to produce friendship, deep intimacy, that heart space. Then we have chemistry, which a lot of us tend to look for first, which is the physical attraction and the passion. And then consistency, so the sustainment of commitment, connection, and chemistry through time, which is what makes it long lasting. Yes. Together, all 4 of these create healthy, fulfilling, stable, lasting relationships. But if you don't have all 4, it doesn't mean you don't have any relationship. It's just the type of relationship you have might be a little shaky, friends. Little shaky, okay? Or it'll just be a different kind of relationship that doesn't necessarily lead to long-term love in the way that you might desire. So for example, if you have just 2 of those components, like commitment and connection, you're friends, right? So we've decided to be committed to each other and we have an emotional connection, your best friends usually fall into this category. If you have commitment and chemistry, but there's no connection, right? You might have a little whirlwind romance. And the example here is like when Britney Spears got married for 55 hours, they got committed and they had a little chemistry, but that wind died down and so did the relationship, right? If you have commitment and consistency, you might be married and together a long time, but the relationship is empty and unfulfilling because there is no connection and y'all aren't necessarily having sex either because the chemistry is lacking. And then if you just have one, the relationship is even less stable. So if you just have chemistry, for example, that's usually what categorizes a one-night stand. And if you have like chemistry plus connection, this can look like a fuck buddy. In some cases, this is also what a new romance would look like, right? Like you might have a little chemistry and you start to build that budding connection, but you don't have the consistency under your belt yet or the commitment yet. So the beginning phases of a relationship can also fall into the connection and chemistry realm. So before we talk about what actually creates an emotionally unavailable man dragon, how to identify them, what to do about them, I'll introduce myself for those of you who aren't already familiar with me. So my name is Amari Ice, and in the media, I'm known as the Prince of Hearts. So I'm a love alchemist, which is short for a love coach, matchmaker, and hypnotherapist. So when it comes to finding the men of your dreams, I can either show you how or I can show you him. So tons of fun there. I'm a #1 international best-selling author. My first book is called Lasting Love at Last, The Gay Guide to Attracting the Relationship of Your Dreams. And though I do primarily work with gay singles, obviously the information, the tools, the techniques, the tips can be useful for any relationship, which is why this particular masterclass is open to all genders, all orientations, because the information is pretty ubiquitous. There we go. I've been working in the LGBT community for over a decade. I started my company 5 years ago. Ooh, the age, the seasoning. Yes, 5 years. My 5-year anniversary is actually May the 30th. So we're coming up on that, which is pretty dope. I studied communication, culture, and psychology at Howard University. I have an MBA in marketing. So a lot of the things that we do, in addition to like actually helping you to develop your relationship skills or maybe find the person, is also around romantic branding. So that's one of my areas of expertise. Like, how do I actually get the right types of people to notice me? And how do I get them to notice the real me and like that part of me versus like a, caricature that we create or that we see other people create when they send their representatives on these dating apps, right? So how do we create a romantic brand that's actually in integrity with who I really am, so that there's no what do you call that? False advertising. You see the commercial and it's all delicious looking and you're like, oh, I want that. And then you get to the restaurant and that is not what it's given. Yeah, romantic branding. So let's walk. That's a little about me. And now we're ready for the first section. Let's hop on into the content. So we begin with an introduction to the emotionally unavailable man dragon. And first things first, what is an emotionally unavailable man dragon? So the way I define this is that an EUMD, for short, is a potential partner who doesn't have the current capacity to form a healthy relationship as a result of their emotional unavailability, but they're still participating in the romantic process anyway. Okay, so in other words, you can be emotionally unavailable and not be participating in the dating process. No big deal, all right? You're taking a break from dating. But if you aren't emotionally unavailable and you're still on dating apps, you are doing a disservice to both yourself and generally everyone you encounter. So when we think about a lot of the issues that singles go through, those issues outside of like, our own dating skills and our own capacity to be good partners, the biggest external obstacle that singles tend to face is the emotionally unavailable man dragon. Okay. So if you don't learn anything else about how to navigate dating, you have to learn how to deal with the fact that you're going to encounter tons of people who are emotionally unavailable if you're going to date with any level of intention. Like, it's just par for the course. And we'll talk about why that is a little later. But for now, just know this is the biggest obstacle. And I saw a lot of head nods already. Y'all were like, oh yeah, I resonate with this. It's true facts, true tea, real rap. The people know this is not a drill. Okay. This is facts. So yeah, just be mindful of that. This is going to be the biggest obstacle. Not, I live in a small town and there aren't a lot of people. This is an obstacle, but it's not the biggest obstacle for most people. Or, there aren't any eligible people in my place. This is usually a lie. We just don't necessarily know how to find the people. But that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is this. How do I deal with the people that are emotionally unavailable? Because for both of those situations previously and most of our other issues, the reason that we believe we can't find someone who's good for us is because we keep finding these. Right? We keep finding the emotionally unavailable man dragon, and that has convinced us that it just can't be done. I'm just not gonna be able to find another relationship. Maybe I'm gonna grow old alone, right? So often that experience, the jadedness, the frustratedness that singles have with the dating process is a result of encountering the emotionally unavailable man dragon and not knowing what to do about it. So as we continue, emotional availability itself is really about the capacity to be emotionally present and to engage in a healthy connection with self and others, right? It's not just, can I connect to other people, but it's also about being able to connect and validate your own emotions, okay? And so this corresponds directly to the love element of connection, which we talked about a little bit ago. Emotional unavailability is the inability to do any of those things, right? You can't be present, you can't engage in a healthy emotional connection with other people because you barely, if at all, have a healthy emotional connection with yourself. Okay. There are two categories of emotional unavailability. Okay. Two categories of emotional unavailability. The first is situational. So you can just be circumstantially emotionally unavailable. Ooh, all these NLs and Ys, alphabet soup out here. And then second, you can also be dispositionally emotionally unavailable. Oh, I did it, friends. I nailed that. And so what does that mean? To be situationally unavailable is usually a result of recently being overwhelmed by an intense emotional situation, experience, circumstance. So the examples I have here are like you just experienced a breakup 20 minutes ago. You just haven't had time to process. You're currently emotionally unavailable. Or something like you've been at this, job for the last 10 years and you thought it was so stable. So you haven't been saving money or anything. And then you got fired and now you don't know what you're going to do. And so now you're real stressed. Like you can't even think about going on a date because dates cost too much money that you don't have. You're still trying to figure out how to pay rent. So you might be a little emotionally unavailable right now as you deal with the stress of that situation. So the key here about emotional unavailability is you aren't able to be present with your emotions. And so what this means is just because you lose your job doesn't mean you're emotionally unavailable. But if you lose your job and the stress resulting from that is so intense that you feel like you can't navigate other regular stuff in your life, you don't have the range. Okay. So that's what that's about. And all of us, to some extent or at some point, have experienced situational unavailability on an emotional level, right? All humans are sometimes unavailable and sometimes a little anxious. Like we all can go either way, just depends on the day, right? Situationally. And this will usually heal once we've had time to process our pain, our discomfort, our, what we would call negative emotions, if we want to look at it like that, like however we phrase it, once we deal with our emotions, or in the case of losing that job, if we replace our source of income, then our situational unavailability tends to dissipate, right? Our level of availability and emotional presence increases. So that's another way you can think of emotional availability. The synonym is emotional presence, right? I'm present, I'm here, or I'm busy, I'm unavailable, okay? So the second category of emotional unavailability is dispositional. And this is usually a result of unhealed wounds from childhood or previous relationships. And so when we look at disposition, this is really about an orientation toward life versus just a situational adjustment or adaptation, right? And one of the ways that we frame dispositional emotional unavailability or our capacity to be present or deal with the anxiety and the intimacy and all those different things connect directly to our attachment styles. And so if we have an insecure attachment style, we are more likely to have a level of dispositional emotional unavailability. And then also traumatic experiences can create that as well. So something like being in a previous relationship with intimate partner violence and just not necessarily knowing how to navigate that, right? Like really traumatic experiences, especially over time or that haven't been dealt with, can cause a shift in the way that we approach life, right? Like major depression or something like that. Like those things might need a little more healing through like a therapeutic experience in order to, let's say, reset or adjust, right? And then you can also heal dispositional emotional unavailability in another way that I'll talk about a little more later. And so keep on the lookout for that. So now let's look at attachment styles specifically, right? Like what are those? If this creates dispositional unavailability, we need to know a little bit more about this to be able to navigate, right? And to be honest, when we think about out of all the things we know or need to know or could know potentially about how to have a healthy, happy relationship, the most important thing I would say is to understand attachment styles. Like so many of us don't realize that the bulk of the challenges and struggles that we encounter have a lot to do with our attachment styles. And most people don't even, like, you might have heard the word, but like most people don't even know what they are, or how it works, right? So our attachment style is the automatic pattern that we use to romantically connect to other people. Technically, it's also how we connect to anyone on a deep, intimate level, even if it's platonic, but it often shows up most clearly or most intensely in our romantic relationships. Because you can work with somebody for, 10 years in that example from before and still not be that close to them, right? If they aren't that close, they're not triggering your emotional energy. They don't have like a house or a room in your emotional mansion, right? And so it's usually people that we get really, 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 really close to that then are activating our attachment styles. So the attachment style is going to develop primarily through our relationships with our parents and guardians in childhood, but it can also be shifted based on our adult relationships too. However, for most people, your attachment style is going to form by age 3. So we're not even talking about like, oh, I had to do this for years and years and years. Like by the time we're 3 years old, we usually have formed our attachment style, and that impacts us, 70% of us, for the rest of our lives. So the vast majority of people, 70% of people, are going to have the same attachment style throughout their lifetime. Okay. Unless they intentionally do something about it if it's an insecure style. But if it's secure, there's nothing to change. It's already secure. So let's look at how we actually assess attachment styles. So first of all, we measure one thing, but along two different scales. And what that thing is relationship anxiety. So we're going to look at how much we fear abandonment. So the anxiety that comes up when we think about someone leaving us. And also fear of intimacy, which is the anxiety that comes up when we get too close to people. So in either case, we experience anxiety, but they're different triggers. So your attachment style is really about whether or not you get triggered by getting close or giving space. And so the higher your fear of intimacy, the higher your emotional avoidance. And then the higher your emotional avoidance, the more emotionally unavailable you are on a dispositional level. And so the intersection of those two scales, your fear of abandonment and your fear of intimacy, is what's going to create or define what your attachment style is. And so now we'll look at the 4 attachment styles and a little bit about each of them. So first, we have secure attachment. And great news, 50% of the population has a secure attachment style. And this is characterized by a low fear of abandonment and a low fear of intimacy. So people with secure styles tend to be comfortable with closeness and space in their relationships. Like if their partner's like, "Oh, I want a hug right now," they're like, "Okay, cool, hugs." If their partner's like, "All right, I need a little space," they're like, "All right, cool, whatever you need," right? They don't usually get triggered by either of those two things. They're pretty comfortable letting you live and being at peace in either sense, right? Like people with secure attachment styles don't personalize their partner's behavior. So if you need space, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. Or if you want to be close, I don't make it mean that there's something wrong with you, right? And while all people can experience fear and anxiety, like I mentioned earlier, the secure style doesn't usually let that cause huge irreparable issues in their romantic relationships. So they might feel a little fear, but they don't, again, make it mean that the relationship is doomed. They're like, I mean, I'm a person, I have emotions, I'm just afraid right now. Like NBD, no big deal, right? So 50% of the population is secure. Then we have the anxious style. And so about 20% of the population have an anxious attachment style. And this is characterized by a high fear of abandonment, but a low fear of intimacy. So these people like to be close, but they get triggered when their partners pull away or need space. And so the anxious attached style is going to be afraid of being alone. And the way that they cope with that is either by clinging to their partners, or they'll try to like bend themselves to fit what their partners think they want, right? They will be preoccupied with the relationship. So they tend to think and obsess over, what's happening, what their partner might be doing. They tend to read into situations a little more, like they're really observant of behavior, and they can make the small behaviors indicative of bigger problems, but they also tend to catch things sooner. So like if their partner is, for example, cheating or something, they usually notice it a lot faster. However, they will personalize it, and they'll think that there's something wrong with them rather than the other person did something that just wasn't, kosher, and that's on them, not on me. They tend to make it about them a lot. So they're anxious that there's something wrong with them, and that's why they aren't wanted. And then you have the avoidant attachment style, which is essentially the opposite of the anxious style. So they're about 25% of the population. They have a low fear of abandonment, but a high fear of intimacy. So if you're like, all right, I'm leaving, they're gonna be like, all right, whatever, right? Like they're not really gonna make a big deal out of you threatening or saying that you're gonna leave or whatever. But that fear of intimacy, oh yeah, it really triggers their anxiety when things get too close, which if you don't have an attachment style, so 75%, 80%, no, my math is wrong. So yeah, 70 to 75% of the population doesn't have a fear of intimacy. So for the rest of us without an avoidant attachment style, it's weird to think of being afraid when people get close, right? So yeah, this is going to come into play in a little bit when we talk about this little back and forth situation that happens often. So the way that an avoidant person tends to respond is that if I get too close, my needs won't be met, because that's usually what happened in childhood, right? Like their parents didn't meet their needs. They pretty much decided that they could only take care of themselves because nobody else was taking care of them. And so they try to cope with their anxiety of not having their needs met if I get close again by just staying away from people. Like I don't have to worry about being disappointed that my needs don't get met if I don't get close enough to somebody to expect them to meet my needs, right? So they kind of tend to be independent to a fault, right? There's nothing wrong with being independent, but when you use independence as like I'm alone with like nobody but me, just me, myself, and I, me against the world, like it starts to create problems on its own before you even encounter anybody else. And then the other thing that can happen with avoidant attachment styles is that they will do the opposite of what the anxious style does. Remember, the anxious type will find reasons why the partner's behavior means there's something wrong with the anxious type. The avoidant type does the opposite, and they look for reasons that a relationship won't work, and they usually blame those things on their partners. Okay, so they're more likely to be like, oh, he had a non-pack, I can't do it, instead of an 8-pack. He had a non-pack, I just can't, right? They'll find reasons that are often like, what? Like that's not a reason to not connect with somebody, but they will find ways to get out, right? They look for what we would call escape mechanisms, and if there aren't any, they just make them up. So yeah, anything to deal with that anxiety of getting too close. And then the fourth style is what we call the anxious avoidant type. So each of these also have other names as well, like other ways you can categorize them. And we can think of the anxious avoidant style as more disorganized. And so where the secure style is consistently secure, the anxious style tends to be consistently anxious. The avoidant style tends to be consistently avoidant. The anxious avoidant style goes back and forth, and it's not necessarily a consistent pattern that they follow. So this is about 5% of the population. And this type has a high fear of abandonment and a high fear of intimacy. And this is often a product of going through traumatic experiences, especially in childhood, right? Like abuse or anything like that. And in this style, the anxiety is triggered both when things get too close and when partners pull away. And the fear here is that if I get too close, I'll get hurt again, which is different than the avoidance fear of if I get too close, I won't get my needs met, right? This fear is usually based on those traumatic experiences of literally being in painful situations in some form, whether that's emotional abuse or physical abuse, doesn't really matter. It's the fear of the hurt happening again. And so they try to cope with that anxiety through a disorganized style of sometimes clinging and sometimes avoiding. It's kind of like, have you heard of, what is it called? Stockholm syndrome, like when the kidnapper falls in love with the person who kidnapped them. It's kind of that type of thing. It's like, yes, my life is in danger, but also the person who put my life in danger is the source of like all my nourishment, my food, my water, my clothes, right? And so it's hard to be like, you know, I don't want to be around this person who's so responsible for my well-being, but also, you know, responsible for the pain too. So it can create a lot of that back and forth situation, which can be really intense and exhausting for a person with this type. And for any of us who don't have a secure style, so 50% are secure, the other 50% are insecure, and that falls into these three types. If we have an insecure style, it can be exhausting too, just personally for yourself, right? Like even if you aren't necessarily dating someone, when you think about dating, or maybe you even decided you want to date, the fears that come up before you even start to engage in the process are often related to your attachment style in some way as well. So now let's connect a little more the insecure attachment styles and one's level of emotional availability. So whether you have a person who's situationally unavailable or dispositionally unavailable, the root cause is emotional invalidation, right? Which can happen at multiple levels, from culture, from family, from past relationships, from self. And emotional invalidation is essentially saying my emotions are bad, my uncomfortable emotions are not safe to feel, emotions are worthless, what are they good for? I should just throw these things away because they never lead to anything productive, right? And so the way that this shows up on a cultural level, we can think of how men are socialized to not have emotions, right? The only uncomfortable emotion that men are, let's say, affirmed to feel is anger. But a man can't be sad, a man can't be afraid, right? Like any of those other uncomfortable emotions are usually shamed, right? And so culturally, that invalidation leads men to then not know how to deal with their emotions when they're adults. So it's like, how can we expect a man who's been conditioned to invalidate his own emotions to now have the capacity to have a healthy relationship, considering all healthy relationships are based on healthy emotional connection? It's like a non sequitur. So we at once tell our little boys, don't cry, man up, all these things, but then we expect them to be able to do relationships well. And it's like, we don't realize that we created that problem, right? So that's culture, which is very similar to family. So I don't think I need to go there because that all connects in that way. But then the same thing with past relationships, right? Like you could have been with a partner who was a narcissist, for example. It could have been a codependent situation or something like that. And over time, that can erode at your self-esteem and can erode at your ability to see your feelings as okay. And also your ability to see yourself as a safe space for your own emotions, right? It can make you question who you are and start to like turn against yourself when you're in relationships that really invalidate who you are over time. And then that self-invalidation makes it almost impossible for you to accept validation from someone else. And so one of the ways we can look at this, an example, just to kind of like test your own level of self-validation, right? Your own capacity to receive love from yourself, but also from others, because the way that we see ourselves, our own identity, our own self-concept, self-esteem is the template for all of our relationships. It's the template for everything we manifest. And so the question is, how comfortable are you with accepting compliments, right? Because if it feels weird for people to compliment you, what you're saying is it feels weird to be loved, right? Because compliments are just compliments, but love itself is the biggest compliment we can ever receive from someone, right? And so if you can't receive a little bit of it, it's really hard to then let yourself receive a lot of it, okay? So you really have to look at how comfortable you are in that process, because that'll give you a really clear indication of if your skill level with emotional availability or emotional validation needs to be increased, okay? So one of the telltale signs. And then naturally, if we know that emotional validation and the lack thereof is related to our own level of emotional availability, then the question that people often ask is, oh, so if I just validate the emotions of the emotionally unavailable man dragon, like, is that all I need to do? Will he then magically be ready for a relationship with me? And the answer is, all right, Jan, pull it back. No. A little too fast there, right? That's not, it makes sense logically, but that's not actually how it works. And here's why. When we look at the dispositional level of emotional availability, right? Our attachment styles specifically, there are three ways our attachment styles can change. Two for the positive, one for the negative, right? So from insecure to secure, and we call this earned attachment. The fastest way to change your attachment style is through therapy or hypnotherapy, but specifically therapy that's focused on attachment issues, challenges, connections. If you just go to general therapy, it's just general therapy. Like it's not designed for attachment specific challenges. And the way you can think about this is when you go to your primary care physician, your general practitioner, right? Like they're a generalist. But in order to get a hip replacement, you have to go to a specialist, right? Same type of thing here. Like attachment is a very specialized set of challenges. And so you want to go to someone who's trained in that. And that's one of my specialties in hypnotherapy. But the second way that you can shift from insecure to secure is by being in a healthy relationship with a partner who has a secure attachment style, okay? However, that's not something that will change your attachment style quickly. It will take years for your attachment style to go from insecure to secure if you're in a relationship with a partner who has a secure attachment style. But great news, if you're in a relationship with a partner who has a secure attachment style, you're already doing what needs to be done anyway. So what's time, right? We're in a healthy, happy, secure relationship. What's time? I'll get there eventually. Now, on the other side, shifting an attachment style from secure to insecure occurs through traumatic experiences. So like going through a war or experiencing severe death circumstances or abusive relationships, right? Like all the things that we talked about that create insecure attachment styles in the first place, particularly on the traumatic level though, can shift us as adults from secure to insecure. And because these are the only ways that attachment styles can change, this means there's nothing you can personally do to change a person who is emotionally unavailable, right? You don't have the range. Okay, friends, we just don't have the range for that. Now, on a situational level, the same is true, right? It is the person's own self-validation that is key for shifting situational emotional availability, okay? So in other words, if you just lost your job or if you just went through a breakup, you're coaching yourself through the process, whether you get help, whether you talk to a therapist, whether you're talking to friends, but it's your own ability to accept the truth that you are okay, that you are fine, that you can get through this, that determines the speed at which your level of emotional availability increases again, okay? So you can totally do that on your own, and we've all done it because we've all been through situations, as we talked about previously, that were situationally causing us to not have emotional capacity to deal with other people or new relationships or anything, right? So the short answer again is no, you cannot change someone else's level of emotional availability. Doesn't matter if it's situational or dispositional. Yes, you can create an environment of emotional validation, and that helps people to then not have those traumatic experiences, right? You're creating a safe environment to sustain whatever level of availability they have, but you can't change it for them. They have to choose to do the work themselves in either case, whether that's, taking my time and processing or going to therapy specifically to deal with those challenges. And so if you are single and you have an insecure attachment style, which is either anxious or avoidant or anxious avoidant, if either of those are your style, and maybe you don't know what your attachment style is yet, easiest way to learn what it is, here's what we can do. If you want to know what your attachment style is, send me a message, not here in Zoom, but like send me an email and I'll send you a link to find out what it is and we can talk about it there. Because I just realized I was going to say some places to go, but you're going to have questions. We can talk. So just send me an email and put attachment style in, what do you call that thing? The subject line, that thing. Yes. And we can get you clear on what your attachment style is. So if you're single and you have an insecure attachment style, the number one thing that you can do to have a healthy, happy relationship is to, one, go to therapy for sure. But secondly, only choose romantic partners with secure attachment styles. What a lot of people tend to do is get into what we call the anxious avoidant trap. All right. And what this looks like, people with an anxious style, right? The people who fear abandonment often tend to get attracted and mutually attracted with someone who's avoidant, which is the person who fears intimacy, right? And this is gonna be so juicy. So you know how we talk about like feeling like the passion and intense sexual connection with someone and like the sparks just flew, right? And it was so fantastic and they swept us off our feet and like all the things. If we have an insecure attachment style, the reason that we are likely to feel those sparks so strongly in the beginning is because they have a complementary triggering style, right? And so the way that this works, the brain doesn't actually know the difference between excitement and danger, okay? Which is why when you're on a roller coaster, you're like, oh, I'm so excited, but I'm also terrified for my life. And usually the only way we can tell the difference between excitement and danger is my life going to be threatened in this situation? Right? If the answer is yes, they're like, oh, I'm probably also a little afraid, right? Otherwise, we tend to think of it as excitement. And especially in relationship situations that are new equates to excitement because passion is actually composed of three things: novelty, mystery, and emotional arousal. So when we meet someone new, there's already the novelty. So we're more likely to have an increased level of passion or intensity just because it's a new person. But the thing that happens with the attachment style is the mystery piece. Because we don't understand their natural pattern of interacting with the world, we are curious and we want to know more. So say, for example, you have an anxious style and your partner has an avoidant style, they're not opening up to you, which makes you more curious. right? And that curiosity takes up the passion, right? So it just increases your attraction to them. And on the other side, you're like, I don't understand why they want to get so close. Like, I don't, what? It baffles you, but you can't deal with getting close. So you're at once baffled and terrified, which is why you didn't run. So then in this anxious avoidant trap, the anxious person, the avoidant person, they meet, the chemistry's crazy from the get-go. Neither one of us knew why. Shout out to Mary J. Blige. And then as time goes on, naturally we get closer, right? Naturally, anybody, human nature. If you spend time with people, you get more intimate. The emotional bonds get deeper. But that's going to trigger the avoidant person to run away. And as soon as the avoidant person tries to run away, that triggers the anxious person to try to get closer. And then they try to get closer. And then that triggers the avoidant person to run more, right? So they keep getting closer, they keep running away until the anxious person is like, fuck this shit, part of my English. Fuck this shit, right? I'm not doing this anymore. Like they finally get frustrated and over it and they give up. And then the moment, curiously enough, the moment that the anxious person gives up, the avoidant person shows back up because now they don't feel triggered. And they're like, oh, okay, I want to come back. And then the moment they come back, the anxious person is like, oh, maybe there wasn't anything wrong with me. Or maybe I did something wrong. I just didn't know what it was. But now they come back and they've forgiven me. And so now I'm going to try to get closer again, which immediately triggers the avoidance anxiety. So then they pull away again, and that triggers the anxious person's anxiety. So they try to get closer. And that it just keeps going back and forth. Okay. They will continue to trigger each other's anxiety. And this is also true with the anxious avoidant style. One of the laws of attachment is if someone has a higher fear of intimacy than you, even if you're already an avoidant attachment style, right? But someone else has a higher level of anxiety than you do, that can trigger your fear of abandonment, right? But this would typically happen in the reverse direction. So it would be the person who's anxious avoidant and they're with an avoidant partner, it will trigger their anxiety that the avoidant partner wants to have space, right? And same is true with the anxious partner. The anxious partner wants to get close, and that triggers the fearful avoidant partner's anxiety, and they pull away, right? So it can go either way with the person who has the disorganized attachment style. So again, the number one thing that you can do if you have an insecure style is to be with a secure person, particularly after or in addition to in tandem with seeking some sort of therapy. Because still, no matter what, if you get with a secure partner, intimacy is a natural outcome of spending time together. So even if the secure partner isn't like, oh my God, I want to be closer, even if they're not clingy, you spend more time with them, you're going to start to feel that intimacy deepen, and it's still going to trigger your anxiety. So if you're not doing something to deal with it, it can be a really rough time no matter who you choose to get into a relationship with, right? So by going to some sort of attachment related therapy, hypnotherapy, it can really help you to better manage the process from that conscious place of, oh, I know what's happening. My anxiety is triggered, but I know that this isn't going to kill me. I'm just not used to this yet. So if I just let myself go through with it, I will eventually get used to this level of security, right? In other words, if you have an insecure style, the reason you tend to pass up on secure partners is because it feels boring. You don't feel the level of excitement that you feel with another insecurely attached person. So you meet a secure person, it feels, you will just feel bored, not because they're boring or uninteresting, but you won't be feeling that same level of danger that you keep interpreting as excitement. And so we tend to write off secure types if we have an insecure type because they just don't feel exciting. So we interpret that as, oh, I'm just not attracted to you. When in reality, you're attracted, you're just not as attracted because they're not ghosting you. I mean, let's call it a thing a thing. That's why. Okay. So when we put all this in context, if you have an anxious style or anxious avoidant and you're with the partner who has an avoidant attachment style and you keep triggering each other's anxiety, it increases the passion, which means for a lot of couples or partnerships where both people have an insecure attachment style like that, the sex is amazing, but the relationship is horrible, which eventually leads to the sex being non-existent anymore because the more sex you have, the more intimacy you build. Who knew, right? So then it's just going to keep triggering. So especially if you have an anxious attachment style or even an anxious avoidant attachment style, but the combination, the fearful type, having random sex with people, like do what you want, it's your life, but like having sex with people like that is often the thing that's going to trigger them to ghost you, right? After sex, if you have an anxious style, because you don't fear attachment, you naturally will feel closer and want to be closer. But they're gonna be like, oh, nah, you can't sleep over. You gotta go, or I gotta go, whatever the case may be, right? They're not going to want more closeness after those intimate moments. And so what happens with a lot of people with anxious styles, then they think maybe I'm bad at sex. And it's like, you didn't do anything wrong. Stop making this about you and your identity. You just chose the wrong partner. You just chose a person who was not capable of meeting your needs, right? Like that is it. So one more time for reiteration, therapy is the number one way that you can get more security. You can earn that attachment style, right? Earn security, and being in a relationship with a partner who also has a secure type, and stop dealing with the fuckboys. Because in general, and I'll put this in even clearer terms, the people that we would consider the fuck boys or the fuck girls or whatever, colloquial terms, usually are going to have the avoidant attachment style, right? The people that are always, cheating and leaving you in dust and all of that, they're avoiding their emotions. People aren't just like cheating just to cheat. It's because it's a way to avoid the uncomfortable situations and emotions in other places. For a lot of people with avoidant attachment styles, sex is the only time they allow themselves to feel any sort of emotion. But then when the emotions start to come up, it's like, oh, it's too much, I gotta go, right? So it's that same thing. So here's the other problem with that, though. People with avoidant attachment styles, even though therapy is the thing that will help the most, they're the least likely to go to therapy because it requires too much intimacy. Therapy will also trigger their anxiety. Okay? So the other thing to be aware of, right? Why do I keep running into all the EUMDs, all the emotionally unavailable man dragons? Even though people with avoidant attachment styles only make up 25% of the population, they're overrepresented in the dating space, on dating apps, all of that. Because all of us humans, we still have a need for connection, even if we don't have the skills to manage it well, right? And so people with secure styles tend to find other people with a secure style, and then they're in a relationship and they've been together for a long time, right? So they tend to partner off and go. People with the avoidant attachment style have a much harder time being satisfied in any relationship. So they tend to be in and out of relationships a lot faster, because as soon as they started to get close, they build, and now they're back on the apps. They don't wait usually until they deal with their feelings to be, they don't wait until they have some level of availability first before they get on the apps. They leave the relationship and go right back to the app because they're distracting themselves from the pain with another person. So then with an anxious attachment style, it's harder to resist engaging with someone who's avoidant, because one, there's a lot more of them, and when they pay you attention, the chemistry is so strong. So it's like this, what, right? So you have to be aware of attachment style. You have to learn what yours is, and you have to know the ways to navigate the dating space based on your attachment style. And let's look at some of the ways to do that in this next section: how to handle the emotionally unavailable man dragons. So first things first, let's talk about why you keep attracting them. Okay, so we talked about the attachment part of it all, right? You're attracted to them, but how do you keep attracting them? What are you specifically doing that keeps giving them the green light to show up? The first thing is a lack of boundaries. Okay, and here's what I mean. This shows up in a few different ways. Before the dating process even happens, what a lot of people tend to do is they will swipe. If you're using a dating app, they'll swipe on people just because they're cute, but they ignore what's in their actual dating profile. Like, you didn't even read the profile. So you're setting yourself up to have a lot more emotionally unavailable man dragons in your DMs, right? You now have to talk to people who are not good for you. And you could have avoided that just by reading what was in their profile. Okay. And I'll get to what to look for in their profile in a slide or two, I think. The other thing is you keep saying yes to situationships and fuck buddies. And it might not be with your words, but with your body. You keep saying yes. You know that this person is not good for you, and yet you still here. Okay. We all can tell when someone's not right for us, right? It's not hard to tell when this person is not going to be the person. It's just hard to accept. Okay. It's not hard to tell when they're not right for you. It's just hard to accept that they're not right for you. And the moment you can accept it is the moment you stop being in denial, right? Because the denial is the inability to accept the truth, right? If you can just accept the truth, then you can do what you need to do to get your needs met, right? Which is a part of the second problem, even though it's not bulleted as a second problem. But the second problem is you ignore your own emotional needs, okay? And so this means you're invalidating your own emotions, which makes it more difficult to set and honor your own boundaries, right? Because the boundaries are saying, oh, here's what I need. And everything on the other side of this boundary are the things that I don't need or that interrupt getting my needs met. So I'm setting a boundary here so that I can continue to get my needs met, right? Boundaries are the systems that make the meeting of our needs inevitable. So if we don't set boundaries, we are making it inevitable that our needs not get met, okay? And because the emotionally unavailable man dragon thrives on not having to get close, they're really attracted to sexual encounters with built-in emotional distance, right? And so if you don't have any boundaries, that also means you have no expectations, because the moment you set an expectation, you set a boundary. So if you're willing to just see where it goes with them, that is a green light to them that, oh, we don't have to get too close. This is just a friend with benefits, perfect, right? Even if they don't say that in words or they don't have the language to articulate it, that is what feels most comfortable for them, okay? So by not setting boundaries, you create this magnetic pull to the emotionally unavailable. Okay? Because, and let's think of this on the other side, the inside coin. What happens internally when we don't set a boundary and our needs aren't met is that if I feel an uncomfortable emotion, which is telling me what need I have, and I choose to, instead of deal with that emotion, I'm going to go do something else, right? So I'm leaving my own body and either getting into my head. So I'm trying to control the process because I'm afraid, but I'm not dealing with the fear in my body. I'm getting in my head so I don't have to feel what's in my body, right? So that's first thing. We'll abandon our bodies and get into our heads. Or in the case of if we have an anxious attachment style, we tend to focus so much on the other person's lack of emotional availability that we don't realize we're using their unavailability to distract ourselves from our own lack of emotional availability with ourselves, right? Our own invalidation of our own emotions, right? That's what we're doing by focusing more on what they're doing or not, what they need or not. Am I doing good according to what they want and what they need? We're trying to meet their expectations, but they haven't set any expectations because they don't want anything. And we aren't setting our own expectations because we fear if I set a boundary, if I set an expectation, then he's going to leave. Great news, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's exactly what's going to happen. And so the real question is, do you want a relationship or do you just want a relationship? Because if you want a relationship, you have to make the decision not to entertain people who don't want the same thing you want. Because if you haven't made a decision, your indecision is creating emotional ambivalence within yourself. And that ambivalence, you know, being of two minds and of two hearts, is going to cause you to take action in opposite directions. So now your actions are inconsistent and inefficient. And if everything inside of here is inconsistent, what reflects back to you in your partnerships and in the manifestations that you're creating in the universe? Inconsistency, right? So the moment you get clear and make a decision is the moment you then are able to make peace on an emotional level and then take action that only, you know, implements that energy. And then what you manifest is in alignment with the integrity you've been showing up in all along. But if we aren't holding boundaries in relationships, we aren't in integrity with ourselves, which is why we keep running away from our emotions, because they keep reminding me that I'm not in integrity. And I'm just trying to press that snooze button because I don't want to get up right now, right? Like that's what's happening on an emotional level. We keep pressing snooze on our emotions and entertaining the fuck buddy instead. Trying to get you to stop pressing snooze, but I won't stop. Oh, okay. Yeah. So here's how we can identify whether or not someone is emotionally available. And this is online. Before we even match with them, if we're on Tinder, before we even send the first message, we have the opportunity to identify whether or not someone qualifies for us to engage with them. Now, this isn't true in every case, but for, I would say 80 to 90% of the time, this is true. And so if you follow this, it's not going to hurt anything. It's just that in the other 10 to 20% of the time, people are saying other things than what I'm about to tell you. Okay. So for the vast majority of people who are emotionally unavailable, there's something very intriguing that happens. And that thing is they tend to tell you the truth. I don't want a relationship right now. Right. If someone says on their dating profile, I'm not looking for anything serious, why do you think you can convince them to look for something serious with you? How? Okay, friends. This is really funny, right? Funny from both experience, but also like as a concept. How can we be worried about whether or not this person thinks I'm right for them if they're not even in search for a person to be right for them yet? They're not even open to that, right? It's like saying, what do you want for dinner? I'm not even at dinner. It's breakfast. Right? We ain't even ate breakfast yet. The first question is, do I want to eat? You already asking me, do I want to go to the buffet? Like, you didn't even ask me if I'm hungry. Right? We haven't gotten there yet. And so the same is true when we're talking about dating. If you don't even want to be in a relationship, why do I care if I'm a good fit for you or not? Like, that's a non sequitur. We're not on that page yet. We're not even on that chapter. We haven't picked a book up from the shelf. Okay. So if they're not looking for anything serious, automatic no swiping, right? Or they'll say something along the lines of, I'm looking for friends and fun, maybe more if the right person comes along. Maybe more if the right person comes along. So I can't be clear that I'm open and looking for my right person, but I can be clear that I'm open to friends and fun. How'd it work? We can clearly see which part they're in integrity with and which part they're not. They're in integrity with, they want friends and fun. They don't want a relationship right now. They're not committed to commitment. So why do you think they're gonna commit to you? Okay. The other thing about the maybe more if the right person comes along, and I'm gonna say this, this isn't true in every case. It doesn't automatically mean this, but this is often a statement that narcissists use. And so just a quick like narcissistic profile, narcissists tend to gaslight, right? Like they make you think you're crazy, but you're not crazy. You saw what you saw, you heard what you heard, you read what you read in those text messages, but they will like make you think that you must be making shit up. The other thing though, is they like the avoidant attachment style, find reasons for things not to be right. And so people with avoidant attachment styles or narcissists, especially, and in general, most narcissists, not all of them, most narcissists are going to have an avoidant attachment style, but all avoidant attachment styles are not narcissists. So just clarify that. Only about 1% of people would be considered a textbook narcissist with like narcissist, wait, I just mix words, would be considered a textbook narcissist with narcissistic personality disorder, only 1% of people. And the other thing to remember is narcissism is a scale that we're all on. It's not a state, it's a scale. But if you're that 1%, it's so high that it's unhealthy. But on the opposite end, if you have very low narcissism, that's also unhealthy because it means you don't set boundaries. You're likely codependent. You don't take care of yourself. You don't stand up for yourself. You don't make a lot of money, right? So we all need narcissism in order to set healthy boundaries for ourselves, in order to have those containers for our confidence to be able to thrive. And so most people are in the middle somewhere. But when we talk about those extreme narcissistic behaviors, we're talking about people who have capacity for empathy, meaning they know that you're feeling feelings, but they just don't care enough to do anything to, pacify them, or there's no couth, there's little tact, but they will charm you and all the things and then disarm you and then gaslight you. So it's like, whoa, get away, right? Maybe we'll need to do another masterclass just on like narcissism, codependency, and how to recognize that. So I can do that if y'all want. Let me know in the comments if that's something that y'all be interested in. But this statement, maybe more if the right person comes along, when you're dealing with a narcissist, there's never a right person because they're always going to find something wrong. And so that's why this statement itself, with both of those clauses, is key. If I'm just looking for friends and fun, don't swipe on them because they don't want what you want. And if they're saying maybe more of the right person comes along in tandem with that, double red flag. Okay. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. None of it. Don't phone a friend. There's no help here. The other thing that baffles me that people don't realize is if the profile is blank, guess what that means they want? Nothing. They don't want nothing, friend. It's blank. It's blank on purpose. It's not blank because they forgot to fill out the profile. They got 17 pictures in a blank profile. And this is the other thing. So remember I said, one of the things you keep doing is swiping on people because they was cute, but not because of what you saw in the profile. If somebody is really cute and really attractive, but they don't have the time to write words, that's often another indication of narcissism, because narcissism is very self-absorbed, right? Look at me, look at my body, follow my directions, because they can also be very controlling in that regard. But the thing that gets you in is there's a blank profile here, but it's cute. So I'm gonna swipe right, because if I get chose, maybe that increases my self-esteem a little bit, that somebody this cute would, you know, see something to me that made them want to have a conversation on the Tinder. What? No, that's not how that works. However, how it does work is if it's a blank profile, you're literally entering into the layer of the emotionally unavailable bandwagon. They don't have emotions for you, nor do they have words. Okay. This person is more likely to ghost you. They ghosted you from the beginning. They didn't even give you no words. They already ghosted you. They pre-ghosted you. Okay. You know that cycle of birth, death, and resurrection. Like they already in the afterlife. Already, right? So any permutations of these three things, any version of I'm not looking for anything serious, or I'm looking for friends and fun, but I can't clearly articulate and own that I want a relationship, problematic, swipe left or delete or block, run, okay? Grab your base, whatever you need to do. And now let's talk about what to do in person. So this counts both if you meet someone live for the first time, like you met organically in a live situation, but also if you do end up swiping on someone and maybe like they didn't have all that stuff in their profile, so you just really couldn't tell, but they were cute. You're like, okay, I'm gonna see how it goes. When you start having conversation with someone, you can also tell if they're gonna be emotionally available, okay? One of the telltale ways is to ask them, what are their relationship goals? If somebody tells you, I don't have any relationship goals, goodbye. Because we know what your goal is, to go nowhere, right? Your relationship goes in the direction of your relationship goals. So if you don't even have any relationship goals, right? Why am I gonna choose you as a business partner or a potential partner? And you're like, I don't know what I want to do with a business. What? You don't know? You're not ready to be a business partner yet. You don't have no ideas? Like, and it's not even that you have to have a timeline, right? Oh, I want to be married by 25 and then have kids by 26. It's not even about controlling the timing, but can you even admit that you want to be in a committed, healthy, happy, lasting relationship with somebody? We don't even talk about me, just anybody, period. And if you can't articulate that you want something, that means I have no way to get anything from you. I have no way to build anything with you. There's nothing here. There is no foundation to build upon. Because I got to know what you want in order for us to be able to tell if what I want and what you want are compatible for us to be able to do and build something together. But if you don't want anything, it's a non-starter. So why we keep trying to start stuff with people who have nothing to start with? Right. And granted, we're not talking about 18-year-olds, 22, 24-year-olds, different conversation. None of us have dated before, perhaps, we just graduate, we're still in college or high school or whatever. You just don't have any experience. That's a totally different conversation than, friend, you're 40 and you don't know what you want. Bye. I don't have the time, and neither do you. You have 40 years and you don't have any idea what you want. Okay, that's because you don't want nothing. Got it. Peep game, friends. Peep game. So the other thing is they will explicitly tell you, I don't want a relationship. I'm legit not looking for anything, which is different than I'm open to love, but I'm not actively looking for it. Right? In those cases where you're like, okay, I'm taking a break from dating. If somebody finds me, cool, I'm down, but I'm gonna just get off the dating apps for a little bit, right? However, if you're on a relationship, if you're on a relationship app, if you're on a dating app, if you met a person through there and now you're having a conversation, or you're even on a date with this person, oh, this leads me to another. Remember the date. Somebody type date in the chat just so I don't forget this tangent. I'm not gonna go into the tangent yet. So you on a dating app and you don't know what you want. You're on a dating app, but you don't want anything, run, friends, just run. That's a trap. It's just a trap. Like there's no other way to even describe it. It's a trap. Okay. Trap, your anxiety is going to be triggered in 3.5 seconds. You can just stand by and see. You can totally not take my words or advice for it. Just see. But trap. And then the last is I'm not sure if I want a relationship. Right. Now, this might be a little different. For some people, this is situational unavailability. Right. Like maybe I just got out recently and I just haven't healed yet. But it can also be somebody who's like, I've been trying to get into relationships and they haven't worked. So I haven't been in a committed relationship like ever in my life or like in 10 years or something like that. And it's like, I don't know, like, do I even want one? Maybe that's the thing. So still, it's a no. But the caveat I would give is for you to say something along the lines of, oh, maybe I have this on the slide already. For you to say something along the lines of, oh, I don't have it on the slide. Okay, totally get it. You don't know what you want, but I know what I want, and I only want to date someone who's also clear. Like you don't have to be clear on if you want me. Like obviously that's what dating is for, to see if it makes sense. But if you don't even know whether or not you want a relationship, if we do end up dating 3 to 6 months from now, probably more like 1.5 months from now, there's going to come a time where you're going to have to make a decision because we're going to get closer. And so if you don't feel prepared now to deal with the natural outcome of investing time just to get to know someone, like we're not even saying we're going to be in a relationship, but naturally, if we start spending time together, we're going to get closer. And as likable as I am, you're probably going to like me. And that's just going to lead to a situation where you're like, I like you, but I'm just not ready for a relationship. And I'm going to be like, what the fuck? Why are we doing this thing? So how about let's just do that now? Why would we even go down that route when we know that that's where it's going to lead? So what makes the most sense is for you to take however long you need to make your decision on even if you want to be in a relationship in the first place. And if that answer is yes, then hit me up and if I'm still single, we can talk about it. But until then, like it's not worth my time. I'm probably going to get hurt. The person who's clear about what I want. Because now I got to wait for you to know if you want it. And I also got to, what? No, we're just not doing that. It just can't be done, friends. It just can't be done. It just can't be done. So the tangent I was going to go on, date. Ooh, friend. When the people won't even call it a date, that's how you know. You don't even call this a date. We can hang out. No, we can go on a date. If you don't want to go on a date, we're not dating, which means you don't want to date, which means you don't want a relationship. Oh, easy answer. Okay. No, thank you. Right? The second, you know how people talk about, or will use the phrase, we're just talking, instead of like, I'm dating someone. No, we're not dating. We're just talking. Ooh, friends. This is textbook emotionally unavailable spin. People who don't want a relationship and are trying to find a way to have more distance, they branded that phrase of talking to be a step before dating, to give them the space to be able to engage with people without getting too close. Talking is just another way to say, I'm afraid of commitment and intimacy. We're fucking dating. Like if you go on one date, it's a date. If you go on more than one date, you're dating. That's how it works. Talking is what you do when you're dating. We can't date without talking. Right? The only caveat I would give this is you met someone on the app, but you never met in person. Okay, I can concede that you're not dating. Maybe. You had a conversation online. But if you have conversations online for longer than a week or two, y'all dating. Especially romantic conversations. Like, what? In this digital realm and you're FaceTiming too, y'all dating. That's a digital date. Virtual dates count. So if you haven't seen them in person or virtually, and you've only sent a few messages, you're in the prospecting phase. But the moment you go on a date, you're dating. This is what it is. And so if they can't even call the date a date, if they can't call dating, they don't want a relationship, they're not sure if they want a relationship, they have no relationship goals, get out, okay? Because all those things are telling you that this person doesn't have the capacity right now to even begin to meet any of your emotional needs, because they are not in a place of meeting their own as it relates to intimacy and relationships right now. Okay. So here's some other things you can do if you do encounter and a EUMD. The first, logically, we've been talking about boundaries a lot, is set boundaries. Okay, got it. And so, like I was saying before, I only date people who are clear that they want a relationship and have the emotional capacity to do so. I don't even entertain people who don't. You have to make a decision to do this. This is the only way that you're going to get into a healthy, happy relationship and avoid EUMDs. You can't avoid them if you don't do this. And if you don't avoid them, it's going to keep you from finding your relationship longer, because you're going to keep being more attracted and more pulled to the danger and the excitement versus the safety, the security, the pleasant, healthy, happy situation that you want, right? It's the boundary that separates your ability to distinguish between those two types of people. The second is disengage. If you're currently, and I'm sure some of you are, if you're currently actively saying yes to situationships and fuck buddyships, maybe not with your words, but with your body, disengaging is the only thing that's going to help you shift the energy. Because as long as you stay in that situation, you're not in integrity with the thing that you want, unless you decide you don't want the relationship that you say you want, which is also fine. You can always make a different decision. It's a lot better actually to say, oh, I don't actually want that type of relationship, right? I'm fine with my situation. It's much better to just decide to do that versus to be in this nebulous transitional state with a lack of clarity and an abundance of confusion. That's just, it's just a big magnet for more emotionally unavailable people. So if you're okay with that, just make that decision to be okay with that. So then it's not eating you up inside that you're, of two minds about it. Just be of one mind. Pick one. Doesn't matter which one you pick. And if you don't like it, choose the other thing. Right? No big deal. But you got to disengage if your goal is a healthy, happy relationship. You just have to decide that you're not going to participate. And some people are like, well, what if I just, have fuck buddies until the right person comes along? To which I respond, friend, you just might be an emotionally unavailable man dragging yourself. Right? You're looking for friends and fun, maybe more if the right person comes along. Cool. And that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. Just know it's not going to work. There's a proverb: if you chase two rabbits, you don't catch either one. Okay? Can't chase two rabbits same time. So you just got to decide. No big deal. And then lastly, don't try to change them because you don't have the range. Okay? You don't have the range, friend. Okay? So here's what we covered today: what the emotionally unavailable man dragon is and how to tell if he's emotionally unavailable or not before you even go on a date with them. Why trying to change them is a huge waste of time. The biggest mistake you're making that keeps attracting them instead of commitment-oriented catches. How your attachment style impacts your experiences with people who are emotionally unavailable. And what to do if you find yourself trapped in the lair. And also, I told you how to find out if you're emotionally unavailable or not, which is also how to find out your attachment style by sending me a message if you want to find out. And we can dive deeper into that. And then the single most important thing that you can do to let love in again, which we talked about as emotional validation, right? After going to therapy and all the other things, but emotional validation is a function of therapy, so that's already built in. So we're kind of like doubling it down twice, but also learning that pattern, that habit, for yourself, like creating an environment of emotional validation for yourself is one of the ways to help nurture that habit if it's already a struggle for you, if it's already a struggle for you to accept compliments, like all those things that we talked about. So that is our information, our situation for tonight. Oh, and then we got Q&A. But before we get to the Q&A, I always like to end with this because it really encapsulates like the entire struggle that we tend to have with relationships is summarized in these next few lines. And that is, love is not a fairy tale, which we all know, right? But it's much more like a video game. And the number one reason anyone is single is because they're trying to have a level 25 relationship with level 3 skills. Those skills include how to deal with emotionally unavailable suitors. Those skills include how to create an effective dating profile, how to validate my own emotions. It's your romantic IQ. Like, do you even understand how love works, right? Like all those things combine to form your level of dating competence, your skill level, right? And so developing your dating skills so that you actually can navigate the arena successfully is what's going to make lasting love inevitable. It's not because there's something wrong with you, or you're not attractive enough, or you're not good enough, or you're somehow unworthy or whatever. Like, that is not why people are in relationships. It's because you're trying to have a level 25 relationship, which is that, you know, idealized view of romance that doesn't exist for anybody anywhere. Like, it's not even realistic, but your skills aren't up to par. And so technically, you only need to be at around a level 7 to successfully navigate the dating process, find a compatible partner, and enter into a committed relationship. And you develop those higher level skills when you're in a relationship. But if we at once have an unrealistic view of what we require, and then we don't even have the needed skill set for what's realistic, like, it's no surprise why so many people struggle to find love, right? So if you're interested in working with me and my team to level up your dating skills, definitely send me a message and we'll let you know how to get started. So yeah, now questions. If you gotta go, thanks for coming. I know we got like a minute left before the official end of the situation, but if y'all do have questions, I can for sure stay for a little bit and answer some of them. And I see that we have a few things in the chat, so I'll also go through those. But you can unmute yourself if you like and just start chatting me up and we can get it going. So I see a question from Jessen. Could you speak to how or what kind of interventions we can do to change our attachment style to secure ideally? Yeah. And that was two ways to change your attachment style: therapy and getting into a relationship with the partner who has a secure attachment style. The only two ways that you can earn attachment if you didn't have, what would we call that? Like innate secure attachment. Like if that wasn't already conditioned for you in childhood, the only two ways to get secure are through therapy or being in a relationship with someone who is secure. So yeah, all this information definitely useful for you if you don't have that secure style. You really, like, I would concede that if your attachment style was secure, maybe you could get away with the whole, I might have a little fuck buddy situation until a healthy relationship shows up. Maybe. I'm not recommending it, but maybe you can handle it if you had a secure attachment style. If your attachment style is not secure, by default, you just can't handle that. Like, it's not a dig, it's not a read, it's not shade, it's just the facts. Like, you're going to be triggered by that. And if you want any level of peace in your life, the only thing you can do is avoid situations that are triggering those unhealthy partnerships anyway, right? So it's at once not in alignment with what you want, but it's also causing you an extreme amount of anxiety. So it's like, why would we choose to continue to do that to ourselves if we don't have to, right? So yeah. Other questions, let's see. Okie doke. You know, brothers are always saying, I'm not looking for nothing. Yeah, friend. They do. And it just tells us they aren't your people. When you're older, you have less patience or time for people who don't know what they want. Ciao.
Come on, Amari. Come on.
The truth. Okay. We don't even need the TH for that. It's the truth. Okay.
I was going to say something, Amari. I have a. Oh, there's Anthony. Go ahead, talk, Anthony.
I think he's a little frozen, it's a little chopped. So go ahead, Gia.
Anthony. Okay. I thought Anthony was going to speak.
No.
He is frozen.
Yeah. All right. There you go, Gia. Go ahead.
Okay. He's in the Matrix. Okay. So I was going to say, Amari, that even if you have a secure attachment style, if you're a woman, like, I think there's also things that happen. There's chemical things that are biological and physiological, that even if you're a secure attachment style and you enter into like a fuck buddy situationship, that ends up not being a great situation for you.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
Not great for anybody.
For anybody.
Who can, here's what's fun. You know how we talk about how men can compartmentalize stuff, and men tend to be more sexually driven and all those things and not wired for monogamy or whatever. No, and in actuality, the guys who struggle most with any of those things have avoidant attachment styles. It's not biology, it's conditioning as a result of, you know, unhealthy attachments as kids. Like, that is the source of it, because we all have that same experience. For all of us, it's hard to detach emotions from sex. Like, we are wired to connect all those things together, right? When you have sex, oxytocin gets activated, and that is the bonding chemical for everybody. It's one of the things that makes it enjoyable. So it's not that anybody's innately wired to not do that, unless you were born like what is it, like a psychopath or whatever, right? Like that's a little different. But for the vast majority of us, like we're not wired to be able to separate those things. We get conditioned to be able to separate those things. But yeah.
Right. Humans are wired for connection. So if someone
absolutely.
is doing, it's like that's not an ideal situation for anyone if they're really living in the truth of how they want to be in a relationship. You don't want things that are not stable and like are up in the air. Like that already is right. And men and women both. I think that's also something people like, oh, men are different when it comes to this. Everyone is looking for those same things, whether you're a man, a woman, or any gender or any, you know what I mean? That's how we're wired as humans.
Absolutely. And the other thing too is if we didn't have, you know, traumatic situations or those stressful situations that create insecure attachments, what I'm not saying is that there's anything wrong with having uncommitted sex with people. I'm not saying that that is a problem in and of itself. What I'm saying is compartmentalizing emotions from that is the problem, right? And so when you're young, before you've gone through a lot of stuff and you're like exploring, you're figuring things out, like you have to have experiences sometimes to understand who you are, how your body works. Like, right, like there's nothing wrong with that. But the issue comes when you're experimenting with someone who's triggering your attachments, right? Who's now creating trauma for you. Because let's just call a thing. Those unhealthy attachment connections, that anxious avoidant trap is a traumatic experience, right? So every time you engage with someone whose attachment style is triggering for your own, it is literally a traumatic experience for you. And so the sexual trauma that comes from that is a part of the reason why it's like, don't do this if you don't have a secure attachment style, because it's just re-traumatizing yourself. Like that's it. So yeah. Very interesting. Anybody else have questions, thoughts, comments? How'd y'all like the masterclass?
It was like right on time because I've been thinking about dating again, and like that was a problem. And like I would recognize it was a problem, but I'm like, why do I keep running into these dudes that I'm like, what in the world? Like, I don't want this, and I know I don't want it. Like, I can see it as soon as like.
Yep, right on time. And you know, to be fair, it's easy to understand, especially having got it all together like this, but it doesn't make it automatically easy to implement, right? Like, in other words, easier said than done in some ways. And so the more that we can make decisions to do what's in our best interest before we're triggered, the better. So in other words, I'm assuming that everybody who came tonight is single. This is the best time to learn about this stuff because you're not already attached to someone whose attachment style is triggering for your own, right? A lot of people don't learn this until they've been married for a little while or together for a little while. And it's just like shit. Now, for the vast majority of people, they break up before they get married. But just because you have an avoidant attachment style or anxious avoidant or whatever, doesn't mean you won't get married. So sometimes people do get married or whatever because we still grow up in cultures and families that have certain beliefs that compel us to take certain actions, right? Like a lot of us get married because that's what we're supposed to do, not because we actually wanted to do it, right? So all those things can still be in play. But if you're in a relationship and you're married and you got kids, and then you find out the reason this has been so much drama and so stressful is because I'm avoidant and she's anxious, or I'm anxious and he's avoidant, whatever. It's like, dang, like I could have saved myself so much stress if I would have known this beforehand, right? Ahead of time. So you all have the opportunity to avoid this now before your next relationship, to be aware, to be conscious of your own attachment style, especially, and that being the template for then who you need to choose and how to choose them as you navigate the dating process. So yeah, really, really glad that you all got to come tonight. Cool. So any last questions before we go? Looking through the chat, Gerard says, this was so affirming, going to uphold my boundaries. I love it. And Leslie says, thank you. It affirms my choices on swiping left and where I'm headed with dating. Yeah, that is my goal for each of you. So thanks again for coming. Like I said, if you want to learn more about your attachment style, send me a message. If you want to work with me, with my team to level up your dating skills, send me a message. Yeah, and we out here. Thanks again for coming. I don't know how you all found the thing tonight, whether it was through Clubhouse or through the email list or whatever, but I think now that you've come to this, you're probably all on the email list at some point, so you'll get the notifications, because I do a Clubhouse room at least once a month, my own Clubhouse room. I'm on a few others too, like the True Love Society and Manifestation Monday, but Love Alchemy is specifically one Tuesday a month. It's usually the second or third. And then I'll also be hosting a masterclass like this each month, usually the third week of the month, third or fourth. So be on the lookout for that. And I hope to see you soon. Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night. Bye.
Good night.
Bye,
Thanks,
Mark.
Amari.
Night, night. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
Bye, Gia.
Bye.